We're delighted to welcome you to the fourth night of our Vacation Bible School. We're having a tremendous school. B.J. Clarke from the Memphis School of Preaching, who serves as their director, is doing an excellent job in presenting material on the flood. We're grateful we could have him with us, and I know those of you who have joined us by social media have been blessed, and certainly those of us who've been able to be here in person. So I'm happy tonight to present to you B.J. Clarke.
I am so very happy to be here, and this study has expanded my knowledge and my horizons when it comes to this subject of Noah and the flood. It's such a familiar story. We've heard it for so many years, preached it for so many years that we might think that we've gotten it all down pat, and certainly what we know is still true. But you know, I feel like the man that used to say every time he walked to the Bible, he felt like a man walking to the ocean with a teaspoon to dip it dry. And what he meant by that is the inexhaustible nature of the Word of God, which is one of the evidences of its inspiration, is that it's, no matter how many years you've studied it, there's something there in the text that's been there all along. You just might not have noticed it. I might not have noticed it, but God put it there, and this book will continue to educate us in such an inimitable way as long as this world shall stand. Now, when it comes to the discussion of the flood, certainly we have looked at the world in which Noah lived. We've looked at the man Noah who lived in that world. We've looked at the ark itself. And tonight the focus is upon the animals. And as you think about the animals that were on board the ark, it's not complicated to figure out. As a matter of fact, you can see in the artist rendering a depiction of 2 by 2, and there is a reason for that. And that reason is found for us. First of all, if you will, go to Genesis chapter 6. These animals did not have to be rounded up by Noah and corralled and lassoed and held in a pen until it was time for the flood to come. The Bible tells us in Genesis chapter 6 and verse number 19, "Of every living thing of all flesh, 2 of every sort, shalt thou bring into the ark to keep them alive with thee. They shall be male and female, of fowls after their kind, of cattle after their kind, of every creeping thing of the earth after his kind. 2 of every sort," notice here, "shall come unto thee to keep them alive. And then take thou unto thee of all food that is eaten, and thou shalt gather it to thee, and it shall be food for thee and for them." And so God had it all planned out. The animals would come to Noah. God would miraculously lead those animals to come to Noah, and he wouldn't have to go out looking for them. Now, I want you to notice that by making sure that there were 2 animals at least of every kind, and we'll talk about the clean animals here in just a moment, but there were also male and female to be selected. I want to make a comment without in any way, shape, or form trying to be cutesy. In fact, it's really a sad thing that our country has gotten to the point where we've been told that identifying male and female is pretty much a matter that is reserved for the person themselves to decide when they get of age what they are or what they are not. And someone has said, well, you know, I don't know whether someone is a male or a female because I'm not a biologist. Come on. Do you have to be a meteorologist to know if it's raining? If it's raining and someone asks you, is it raining? Do you have to say, I don't know, I'm not a meteorologist? You know whether it's raining or not. And dear friends, I know male and female, and you know male and female, and when it comes to identifying the animals, true or false, Noah needed to be able to know whether he had a male and a female. Did he need to know that? Absolutely, he needed to know it. Did God think that there was a way that Noah could know that empirically, know it factually, objectively? Yes. It wasn't a subjective thing where Noah says, well, I sure hope I got a male. I don't know. I didn't ask the animal what the animal identifies as. Friends, we know better than this, but unfortunately we live in a world where this kind of thing has been bantied about as such a scientific thing that we're duped into believing that really, well, maybe we are wrong about this. No, we know what male and female equals, and we know that by producing or by bringing male and female aboard the ark, the reproduction of those animals would thus be possible after the ark had landed and the animals had deboarded. And so there was the need for the repopulation of the earth. So at least 2 animals of each kind were taken, and one had to be a male and the other had to be a female. But some people don't read far enough to know that that's not all that God said about this, and so consequently, some have even argued, well, the Bible contradicts itself. And no, it does not. Genesis 1 gives an account of creation, and Genesis 2 then gives you further information. And Brother Curtis Cates, who's passed on to his reward, used to illustrate it in such a fine way, and other preachers have probably used similar illustration. When you're watching a college football game, one camera will usually show you the whole play as it unfolds from a wide-angle view where you can see the whole thing. But then when they do a replay, often one camera will have been trained on the wide receiver as he's running his route, or on the cornerback as he's making his defense of the pass, and the camera is zoomed in on them, isolated on them. And so when they play the replay of the play you saw in general, is it a different play or is it the same play just from a different angle? Well, the same thing is going on with Genesis 1 and 2 and God's creation. There aren't 2 competing accounts of creation. They're both complementary to one another. And here in Genesis chapter 7, I want you to notice that there is more wisdom from God. Look at Genesis chapter 7. After he tells Noah to come on in to the ark, verse 2, note, of every clean beast thou shalt take to thee, King James renders it by 7s, the male and his female, and of beasts that are not clean by 2, the male and his female. Of fowls also of the air by 7s, the male and the female, to keep seed alive. What's the purpose of this? To keep seed alive upon the face of all the earth. And so God makes it abundantly clear that he's going to have clean beasts brought by the number of 7. Some would say 7 pairs. Some would say 7 total. I think the American Standard Version says 7 and 7. But as one individual has noted, that doesn't necessarily mean 2 pairs of 7 any more than verse 9 of chapter 7 means 2 pairs of 2. There went in 2 and 2, meaning they came in by 2s and then 2s. They came in by 7s and then 7s. No matter the number, what the wisdom of it is, you can see Noah knew the difference. He knew what God wanted. And so there was a need to have more clean animals on board than unclean. Why? You couldn't eat the unclean animals. They wouldn't be sacrificed. So there wasn't a need for more than 2 of those, 1 male, 1 female. But when it came to the future availability of sufficient animals for food and for sacrifice, they would need to be clean, both for the consumption and for the sacrifice. And did God see to it that a sufficient number of clean animals were aboard the ark so that those things could take place? Indeed, he did. Now, those who call themselves Bible believers generally don't bat an eye when it comes to the idea that a wide variety of animals were brought aboard the ark. And you can tell them the different kinds that were brought aboard the ark, and generally, Bible believers especially don't bat an eye at this, but even some who would say they believe the Bible have one question that everyone seems to want the answer to, and this is the number one question that so many individuals in the field of Christian evidences have been asked about again and again and again when it comes to creatures aboard the ark, and you probably know the question, don't you? What about the dinosaurs? Are you telling me that there were dinosaurs that lived with men and that they actually put on the ark with them? And again, as I noted, I think last evening, no one is arguing that you would have to find the largest dinosaur on the planet and say, you're coming with me. There were certainly other options available, but let's deal with some fundamentals first. Does the Bible even mention dinosaurs? Some people say, no, the Bible never has the word dinosaur in it. There's not a single word in the Bible that is translated dinosaur in our English Bibles. Well, there's a reason for that, but first let me point out to you that if you're going to use the argument that because dinosaurs are not explicitly mentioned by that term in the Bible, therefore they didn't go on board the ark, you're going to have a little problem, logically speaking. You've made a false argument because you've assumed that the absence of a word means the absence of the animal. If you're going to use that argument, here's your problem. The Bible never mentions specifically cats by that name, kangaroos, elephants, aardvarks, anteaters, platypuses, and penguins. Is there anyone here tonight that would say, therefore, they don't exist? Therefore, those things aren't real. Those things were not taken aboard the ark because the Bible never mentions them. No one would argue such because it would be an invalid argument. It would be unsound. That's not what is the case. As a matter of fact, wait a minute, you mean I don't exist? Now, I'm more of a dog man than I am a cat man, so I told my wife, what if I said tonight, if only that were true? I said, the cat lovers in the room are going to hate me, and they're going to run me out of the building. But be that as it may, cats exist. They're real. God made them for a reason, to torment the rest of us with the independence of an animal that doesn't care whether we live or die, as long as it gets what it wants. The dog is so happy to see you when you walk in the door. Well, I'm not here to talk about that, but the bottom line is, based on this argument, there is no rationale that says just because the word dinosaur is not in the Bible, therefore there couldn't have been any on the ark. Here's something that a lot of people may not know. The word dinosaur that we are so accustomed to in our day and time was not in the Bible because the word dinosaur did not really even come into our vernacular and our usage until long after the Bible was written and long after it was originally translated. It was translated into English in 1535 by Miles Coverdale. That's one of the earliest translations you can find. And but here's the thing, the English word dinosaur did not make its appearance until 1842. It's actually a combination of two words, Danos meaning fearfully great and sauros meaning lizard or reptile. And so the DINOSAURS is something that was not translated dinosaur in any of the standard translations of the English Bible that were used for so long because the word didn't even exist yet. So it's not shocking or surprising that the word's not in the King James Version of the Bible or some other translations of the Bible that you read, because the word wasn't even coined until 1842. But then when you go into modern translations, quote, after 1842, they don't use the word dinosaur. However, there is evidence that human beings and dinosaurs, are you ready for this, coexisted. Someone says, no, you did not listen in science class, did you? Dinosaurs were extinct 60 to 65 million years before human beings ever arrived on the planet. And there's no such thing as dinosaurs and human beings living at the same time, so we're told. And because someone in a long flowing white laboratory coat that calls themselves a scientist makes that proclamation, that declaration, then some of us are supposed to bow at the altar of science and say, therefore, it must be so. But true science means to know. And if you want to know the whole evidence about whether dinosaurs and human beings coexisted, let's first of all look at the Bible itself. The Bible actually does talk about God creating on the sixth day all of the land animals, Genesis chapter 1, 24 and 25. And you'll notice the broad scope of this statement there in Genesis 1, verse 24 and verse 25. Here's what you read. God said, "Let the earth bring forth the living creature after his kind, cattle, creeping thing, beast of the earth, after his kind." And it was so. God made the beasts of the earth after his kind, and the cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And so the land animals were created there on the sixth day. There is no land animal, mark it down, not a single land animal that was not created on day 6. The Bible is clear about that. And so in Exodus chapter 20 and verse 11, in 6 days the Lord made heaven, the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, or all that in them is. You'll note, yes, that includes everything created within a 6-day period. 24-hour day, someone says, for sure. Why? Because God needs 24 hours 6 times to make a universe? Question, and I mentioned this the other day, but I want to emphasize it again tonight because someone might not have been here, or someone might not have heard it or remembered it. I don't flatter myself to think everything I say is constantly remembered and never forgotten, so let me reiterate to be established in the present truth. When God says, "Let there be," and there was, He, I promise you, based on his ability to just speak things into existence as described in Psalm 33:6, the Lord spoke and it was done. He commanded, it stood fast, says verse 9. 6 says, "By the word of the Lord were the heavens made, and all the host of them by the breath of his mouth." So God is so powerful, he can speak planets, galaxies, constellations into existence. And someone says, well, but how does light get from that far away to here when it takes millions of years for light to travel that far? Let me ask you one of the most fundamental questions that once you get this, it's like, okay, the rest I can grasp. This is not a hard thing. People say the age of the earth has to be ancient because of so many factors. The earth has to be ancient, can't be young, can't be only a few thousand years old, we're told. Okay, what is your argument for that? Well, because of the time it takes for light to get from distant planets or stars to where we are today, etc., etc., etc. Okay, let me ask you this question. When God made Adam on day 6, did he make him as a helpless little baby boy that needed a mama to nurse him and to bring him along so that he could become a toddler and then an adolescent and then a young man and then an adult? Is that the way it worked with Adam, the Adam of Genesis 1 and 2? Was he a little baby, needed a mama? Or did God create him according to Genesis 1 mature and full grown, ready for operation on day 6. Day 1 of his existence, day 6 of creation. Did Adam have to develop and grow up and grow older so that he was able to dress and keep a garden? Or did God make him, build into him the appearance of age? Well, we just so happen, my wife and I, to have an Adam that's dear to us, our grandson, Adam, born November of 2017. And so here we are enjoying Adam the day of his birth. 5 days after Adam, our Adam, was born. 5 days after he was born, he looked like a 5-day-old. I wonder why. Because he was 5 days old. Let me ask you, God created Adam on day 6. 5 days later, if you look at the Adam of Genesis, 5 days after he came into the world, and look at our Adam 5 days after he came into the world, would there be any difference? Oh yeah. The difference would be that our Adam came into the world as a little baby who needed to grow up. The Adam God created was mature enough and full grown enough to handle the responsibilities God gave him. And yes, God built into him the, notice, appearance of age. He appeared to be older than he literally was. How old did our Adam look 5 days after he was born? He looked 5 days old. How old did the Adam of Genesis 1 and 2 look 5 days after God made him? Did he look like a 5-day-old? He looked hundreds, you could even say thousands of times older than he actually was 5 days after his existence was brought about. Therefore, God built into him the appearance of age. Question, if God could do that with man, could he also do it with the universe and with the animals? Yes or no? Sure, he could, and he did. Now, here's where we get to go to our Bibles and enjoy some time. I wish we had more time to spend in these chapters than we will have available to us tonight, but I do want you to know that in the Bible, yes, though you do not find the word dinosaur because it didn't exist yet, you do find descriptions of a creature that matches the dinosaur that you and I know. And may I make this very strong, emphatic statement at this point. To admit that dinosaurs really were real, that they really did exist, does not give 1 inch of ground to the evolutionist. It does not give an inch to the evolutionist. We don't, by admitting that dinosaurs existed, somehow make evolution true. Because evolution and its claims are not connected solely to the idea of whether dinosaurs lived or died. Their claim that they died out 60 to 65 million years before man came along is absolutely untrue. But I want you to see there's evidence in Scripture for this. If you'll go to the book of Job, may I remind you, Job is a patriarch. We know this by the fact that he was offering the sacrifice on behalf of the family as a patriarch there in the 1st chapter. We know this probably because of the fact that he lived as long as he did. His longevity was longer than some of the individuals that would come along after him. And so he lived in the patriarchal age. And so he lived earlier in Bible history than others who came along later. And he lived as you read about here in Job chapter 40, the Lord wants to respond to Job, and I wish I had time to give a little more background, but I don't. So here, but let me just give you this background. As good a man and as enduring a man as Job was, even he himself would put his hand over his mouth after this one-on-one with God and hold his hand over his mouth and say, I have spoken things rashly. I have spoken things that I didn't understand. Job never did divorce himself from God, but he did say at times, God, I don't understand why you're making target practice out of me. I don't understand this. I don't understand that. And if you could just talk to me, I could get some answers from you. And so when Job finally gets his chance to talk to God, God says, let me ask you some questions. And over 70, starting about Job 38 and continuing on, you find over 70 rapid-fire questions that God is throwing at Job. Hey, Job, tell me how I did this when I created the world. How did I do that? No answer. Job, tell me when I told the water you'll go this far and not any further. How did I do that? I don't know how you did that. Over and over, every question God asked him, guess what Job knew about it? He knew nothing about it. And he finally had to admit, I'm out of my league, way out of my league. Now, that is important to know as to why God would bring up such a massive creature as the behemoth or the Leviathan that we'll see in the next chapter. If you'll notice here in Job chapter 40, note the question that God asks in verse 2. Shall he that contendeth with the Almighty, that would be you, Job, instruct him? You're going to teach me, instruct me about how the world ought to be run, how a universe ought to be run? What do you know about making a universe, Job? He that reproveth God, well, are you ready? Get ready. Get ready to answer. All right, here we go. Job answered and said, Lord, verse 4, and remember, there's already been a whole lot of questions asked that Job could not answer, and so God's just saying, I'm going to drive the point home so you don't forget it. Job, I'm vile. What shall I answer thee? Job says to God, I'm vile. I will lay my hand upon my mouth. Once I've spoken, but I will not answer. Yea, twice. I will proceed no further. I'm going to hush. I have learned my lesson. But God's not done yet teaching the lesson. The Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind. Can Job create a whirlwind? No, God can. Look at the force that God controls. And Job, no, you can't do that either, can you? Okay, well, let me ask you, as he keeps asking him all these questions, will you do this? Will you do that? That you may condemn me, that you may be righteous, verse 8. Drop down to verse number 15. Job, I want you to behold the behemoth, which I made with thee. Stop right there. Some commentators will come to this very section of Scripture and claim this is just a poetic description of a non-existent creature that God is making up for the purpose of driving the point home to Job, but this is not an actual, literal, historical creature. Well, wait a minute. God says in verse 15, which I made with thee. If the behemoth in verse 15 is not actual and historical, why would Job be necessarily actual and historical? Truth is, both are actual, historical. There was a man named Job, yep, and there was a behemoth. What are his characteristics in verse 15 of Job chapter 40? He eats grass as an ox. He doesn't say he's an ox. He eats grass like or as an ox. Look at him. Lo, now his strength. Where is it centered? In his loins. His force is in the navel of his belly. He moveth his tail like a cedar. When he swishes his tail, it looks like a cedar tree. And cedar trees in Lebanon especially were big, thick cedar trees. And so to imagine one of those swooshing, a tail swooshing behind a creature that was as big and thick around as the trunk of a cedar tree. My Bible, by the way, has a marginal note here for behemoth in verse 15. It says, the elephant, as some think. Now, I'm not the first preacher and shouldn't be the last to note, the tail of an elephant does not exactly look like a cedar tree swaying back and forth, does it? Oh, a translation in the marginal notes section suggests hippopotamus. Think of the tail of a hippopotamus the little curly-Q tail, and ask yourself if that reminds you of a thick cedar tree swishing back and forth. Look at the creature that is depicted here, and the tail that is thick and long and stout, and you see that he moves his tail like a cedar, verse 17. And then you'll note, if you will please, the statement that is made in verse number 17. The sinews of his stones are wrapped together. I mean, his bones are as strong pieces of brass. I mean, he is built. He's stout. His bones are like bars of iron. And he's the chief, and in rank, he's the chief of the ways of God. There's nothing that can approach him. In fact, he that made him can make his sword to approach him, but no other man can. God is not intimidated by the behemoth. God made the behemoth. Job, most men don't even have a chance against the behemoth by themselves. They would have no chance. If you as a man can't even handle the biggest thing I made, how can you handle me, the one who made it? How can you know more than I do? You can't conquer this. You don't have the ability to conquer this. What makes you think that you would be able to be sovereign, more sovereign than I? And so the Bible then says in verse 20 that the mountains will bring him forth food where all the beasts of the field play. And not all dinosaurs, by the way, are looking for flesh. They weren't all meat eaters, as you know. They weren't all carnivores. Some of them were herbivores and some were omnivores, or you can find individuals that could be both. But here you see that the one described here is eating grass, and the mountains are bringing forth the food. He lies under the shady trees in the covert of the reed. He's under the cover of all the, but when he stands up, notice verse 23, he drinks up a river and hasteth not. He trusted that he can draw up Jordan into his mouth. Now, if you've ever been with James Rogers at dinner, seen him drink a Diet Coke, you know how quickly it can be consumed. And I'm right there with him. That's just a couple of men sitting at a dinner table. Imagine this mammoth creature, this behemoth, dipping its head down into the water and getting a drink, and it's like the river comes up with him. This is an amazing creature described here, and the Bible says that he trusted that he could draw up the whole Jordan into his mouth. Hyperbole, exaggeration for the sake of emphasis. Figurative language is often combined with the literal in this section to show you that these individuals were real, but their abilities were like this or like that. But the animal or creature itself was real. Now let's go to the next chapter here. Verse 1 of chapter 41. Canst thou draw out Leviathan with an hook? Now, do you have a marginal note in your Bible for Leviathan? Some have crocodile, some have whale, and others would have different suggestions there, but it depends on which marginal note you're following. But as far as the actual translation, it's Leviathan. Well, give us a description of this Leviathan. Well, verse 2, can you put a hook into his nose? These are all rhetorical questions that demand the answer, no. No, you can't. You can't just walk up to Leviathan and put a hook in his nose and lead him away as your captive. Nope. Can you bore his jaw through with a thorn? You better not. Try. Will he make many supplications unto thee? Will he speak soft words unto thee? Please don't take me captive. Please don't hurt me. Please don't hurt me. No, he's not afraid of you. He doesn't need to beg you for himself to be free. Will he make a covenant with thee? Verse 4. Are you going to make him your servant forever and he'll just do you whatever you say? He'll be obedient to your commands. No, that's not the creature we're talking about here. What, are you going to play with the Leviathan like you would a bird? Are you going to bind him or capture him for your maidens and say, look what I brought you? You're not going to do that. Shall the companions make a banquet of him? Verse 6. Shall they part him among the merchants and just sell off different parts of him? Can you fill his skin with barbed irons or his head with fish spears? The weapons that you use to try to bring him down, he's impervious to those. Those things do not affect. Go ahead and try to lay your hand on him. Verse 8. Remember the battle, you'll do no more. That'll be it for you. What's the last thing he ever did? Well, he put his hand on the Leviathan. I don't think you want to do that. Behold, the hope of him is in vain. In fact, when you see him, and Hollywood does everything it can in the modern day movies to depict the awe and the amazement and the fear and the panic all registered in the facial expression of the movie character that sees the dinosaur hovering over them, leaning down toward them with their face. And this is something that we're used to seeing in the Hollywood depictions of this. But Job, by inspiration, wrote down what God said about it way back then. The hope of him is in vain. Shall not one be cast down even at the sight of him? You'll just fall in submission and be absolutely stopped in your tracks at the very sight of this creature. And notice verse 10, none is so fierce that dare stir him up. You talk about let sleeping dogs lie. I understand that. Let sleeping dinosaurs lie too. Why would anybody in their right mind say, that dinosaur over there doesn't even know I'm here. I'm going to wake him up. See what happens. That's foolhardy. None is so fierce that dare stir him up. And then this, by the way, is the whole point of going through the behemoth and the Leviathan. This is what God wants Job to see. Last part of verse 10. Who then is able to stand before me? If you can't stand before the biggest creatures I made, what makes you think you could stand before me? You cannot. Now notice there's some other things said about this creature that I do not want you to miss. Verse 13, who can come to him with his double bridle? Are you going to walk up to a dinosaur with a bridle and bridle him up and ride him like you would a horse? No. All these no questions or answers to these questions. Verse number 14, who can open the doors of his face? Is there a veterinarian on the planet that would take the jaw of the dinosaur and open it up to get a look inside? Let me just inspect your teeth. His teeth are terrible, roundabout. His scales, well, that's part of his pride because that's his defense. They're shut up together so closely sealed, the air can't even get through. They're joined one to another, verse 17. They stick together, they cannot be sundered. And then by his sneezings, a light doth shine. His eyes are like the eyelids of the morning. Out of his mouth go burning lamps, and sparks of fire leap out. Out of his nostrils go forth smoke out of a seething pot or cauldron. His breath kindleth coals. A flame goes out of his mouth. And some people say, well, that can't be real. That sounds like a fire-breathing dragon. Well, let's talk about that. We need to discuss this matter of the history of these creatures, and we're going to come back to Job here at chapter 41 in just a moment. But remember, the word dinosaur not used until the 1840s. Well, what were they called before that then? Dragons. Well, dragons are mythical creatures. Well, we don't think of dragons today in the same way that people back then, before the word dinosaur came along, thought of them. And as a matter of fact, there are many cultures that have ancient stories about dragons that closely resemble dinosaurs. In fact, the picture on the screen, this picture on the screen right here, Let me tell you a little bit about this picture. In 2003 in South Dakota, there was a nearly complete dinosaur skull, which was found in South Dakota in 2003. But this is what's so interesting about it. This picture on the right, as we're noticing, is similar to paintings of certain dragons, so similar to paintings in ancient caves and other places of dragons that they even named this thing Dracorex, which means Dragon King. If you go to Indianapolis, where this is housed today, you go to the Children's Museum of Indianapolis, you can find that skull there. And as a matter of fact, here's what they said in the labeling and the description of this exhibit. Watch this. When we saw this creature's head, we weren't sure what kind of dinosaur it was. Its spiky horns, its bumps and long muzzle looked more like a dragon. Well, imagine that. Maybe that's because they were called dragons then. They weren't called dinosaurs yet. They were dragons and dinosaurs. Get this in our minds. Let's get this in our minds. Dragons and dinosaurs are two different words from history to refer to the same creature. Well, someone says, surely you don't believe in such a thing as a fire-breathing dragon or fire-breathing dinosaur. Well, let me ask you a question. Are there any creatures that God has made, the God of heaven, are there any creatures God has made that carry an electrical charge with them, yes or no? What about the electric eel? 500 volts of static power that can kill a man? And then you think of the bombardier beetle, which can send something rocketing out of its body, that rockets out of its body at the temperature of 212 degrees Fahrenheit. You're talking about explosive power coming out of a bombardier beetle. But the same God who gave the beetle that ability could not give a dragon or a dinosaur a similar ability. Why not? Why not? There's no reason that he couldn't have. As a matter of fact, there is every evidence that the dinosaurs existed and that they are extinct. We'll talk about that very quickly in just a moment as to why. But let's look quickly at some physical evidence. There's the Stegosaurus of Cambodia. There are the Ecostones of Peru. And then you have the Apatosaurus of southeastern Utah. I'll have to go through these rather rapidly. This is the Stegosaurus of Ica, Peru. Now, no, this is the Stegosaurus of Cambodia. Let me get it right. This Stegosaurus of Cambodia, yes. The Stegosaurus stone that is here depicted was found, now get this, on a Cambodian temple from 1186 AD. Now, how could these ancient Cambodian people have so accurately depicted the Stegosaurus dinosaur that allegedly went extinct 60 million years earlier and hundreds of years before paleontology was invented to even tell us that this is what a Stegosaurus would have looked like? How did they know that then? My name is Stegosaurus, I'm a funny looking dinosaur. I remember the song from our children's childhood. And there are these marks on the top of the Stegosaurus that distinguish it. And how did the people of Cambodia around 1186 AD know that's what a Stegosaurus looked like before the paleontologists came along and found some fossils and things of that nature and started putting two and two together? How did they know that? Is it possible, my friends, if a certain kind of animal goes out of existence today, if we have a picture of it, and that picture is passed on down to the next generation who reproduces that picture and passes it on down to the next generation, and it continues to be passed on down pictorially from generation to generation, is it possible that an animal that could go extinct in our lifetime could be known later on, hundreds or thousands of years down the road, as to what it looked like because pictorial evidence had been preserved in each generation? Is that possible? Yes. So there must have been at some point human beings who saw these things and knew what they looked like and drew a picture. And someone else drew another picture, and someone else drew another one, and another one, and another one. And that brings me to Peru, the Ica stones of Peru. These stones, now I will tell you quickly, there are some fakes that exist in this world where someone took the idea, hey, the originals, that's a great idea for us to make some money off of, and so they have, some people created some deliberate fakes. But you know what? Does the existence of something fake disprove the existence of the real? Does a counterfeit $100 bill mean there's no such thing as a real $100 bill? Does a fake Ica stone mean there weren't any legitimate Ica stones? No, they were legitimate. In fact, they were discovered as early as 1535, and then they just kept finding them. In fact, found thousands. Now, I don't know what you can see from where you are, but if you look at this stone, and it's very heavy, as I'll show you a picture in a moment that corroborates that. This is a drawing on a stone that, if you look at it carefully in the outline of it, this is a drawing of a dinosaur. Now, who in 1535 or earlier than that got up one day and said, you know what I think I'm going to do? I'm going to draw some pictures on a stone to try to dupe the world into believing that dinosaurs and men lived at the same time. That's what I'm going to do today. No. I can promise you, if you'd ever seen a dinosaur, you'd want to tell someone what you saw. You'd want to draw a copy of it, and others would take your copy and show it to others. They didn't have the internet back then, so look at my phone, the picture I took on my phone. They would do their own depictions, and one of the things that ancient people were drawing were depictions of dinosaurs. How did they know in the 1500s what a dinosaur looked like before the paleontologists came along and put their pictures out there? This individual right here by the name of Philip Coppens says, I traveled to Pensacola, Florida to see the largest collection of these stones in the U.S. Most evolutionists that believe the stones to be fake, and you'll see all kinds of documentaries on television and other places that just are determined to prove these are fake. But most of those folks have never even seen them in person. They're incredibly dense and heavy. When you see them yourself, you'll notice the care that must have been taken to carve these stones and to question the processes that were used to accomplish it. Those individuals who would question it have not looked carefully enough. Now quickly, notice here the third strand of evidence, the Apatosaurus, southeastern Utah. On the underside of what is the third largest natural bridge in the world, in southeastern Utah, several petroglyphs and pictographs exist, which rock art experts believe to be anywhere from 500 to as old as 1,500 years old, and some would say even older than that. If you look right here, friend, you see the head of the dinosaur, the long neck, the thick body, the stout legs, and the tail that just keeps going like a thick cedar tree. And here you see a depiction of man in the same. What made these individuals who drew those pictures so many years ago think that men and dinosaurs could have lived together, and how did they know what one looked like before modern day paleontology told us what they said they looked like? These carvings are believed to be the work of certain Indians who lived in that area of southeastern Utah. A mountain goat, a human figure, multiple handprints, many other carvings and drawings can be seen quite easily underneath the bridge on both sides of the span. But the most fascinating piece of rock art is that petroglyph of a dinosaur located about to the right of the span, about 10 feet off the ground. This figure, which is carved into the rock, has a long, thick tail, long neck, wide midsection, small head. Any unbiased visitor would have to admit this particular petroglyph looks like a dinosaur, specifically a Patasaurus, more popularly known as Brontosaurus. So this idea that, oh no, they couldn't have lived together. Here's another quick strand of evidence. Soft tissue found from dinosaurs, electron micrographs of a portion of tissue being stretched. Tissue here depicted is from Thescelosaurus vertebra. And so this is tissue that hasn't hardened altogether yet. They found, I thought everything, if dinosaurs were as old as they claim, 65 million years before we ever got here, then friends, the soft tissue would have been hardened long ago. Truth is, this world is not as old as they want you and want me to believe. Someone says, are you saying dinosaurs were on the ark? Well, let's ask a few questions. If the largest fossil dinosaur eggs indicate that a 40-foot-long dinosaur laid eggs that were less than a foot in diameter, then question, would Noah have had to take this with him? Or could he have taken the newly hatched dinosaurs? The average size of a dinosaur, also a lot of people don't realize, the average size, we're not talking about the exceptions to the rule, but the average size of even the mature dinosaurs was about the size of an American bison. And as hatchlings, even the largest dinosaurs that hatched were no bigger than an average house pet. So you could very easily, since God is in charge of this gathering together of the animals process, could very easily have made sure that the dinosaurs that would have boarded the ark were the smallest of ones available, needing the least amount of care. So what happened to the dinosaurs? Look, I'm not one of these individuals who believes that we ought to deliberately abuse the planet. Neither am I one who lives in fear every day that, oh no, we're going to face catastrophic events that are going to end the world because of all the accusations that are made about climate change in our day and time. But I'll tell you, in their day and time, when the canopy of heaven was opened up, Genesis 7:11, and the fountains of the great deep were broken up, then you see a lot of the changes in the environment that would have taken place. And one thing is certain, after the flood, what happens to the lifespan of men and women, human beings, after the flood? What starts happening to it? It starts going down. Something happened after the flood that made this world a different place, and one in which you couldn't live as long. And furthermore, for those who were able to hunt the sized dinosaurs, especially that had not yet fully grown, or the ones that were no bigger than the American bison, the ones who might hunt in groups, Genesis 9 and Genesis 10 put the fear, and this is something that I'll close with, that needs to be observed. In Genesis chapter 9, after God sends forth Noah and the families from the ark, notice verse 1 of Genesis 9, be fruitful and multiply, replenish the earth, and the fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon which beast? Every beast of the earth. Every one. upon every fowl of the air, upon all that moveth upon the earth, upon all the fishes of the sea. Into your hand are they delivered. The reaction of the animals after the ark and the flood was different than the one before. And so we'll go ahead and stop there and give the Lord's invitation in just a few minutes based on some things we've learned tonight.
I know you're glad you're with us tonight for that presentation. We encourage you to come back again tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. for the final night of our Vacation Bible School. Thank you for joining us.